Perspective is not the first thing you think about when you build a Minecraft. At its core, it's a survival game. I may pick one particular angle to create a good composition, but at the end of the day, I'm going to be walking around the things I make. Confining yourself to one angle seems limiting at first glance, but there's a surprising amount of depth achievable when you do it. Now, at this point in time, I have zero experience with this technique, so we start by experimenting. The inspiration for this video came from this build by Ember7, which is just insane, by the way. So to start out, I've set a very, very similar straight-on view for my build space here. Okay, the first thing I want to experiment with is just using depth to create different thicknesses. So first, I'm just going to create a horizontal line like this, clone the whole line, grab these, move them back. How does that look? Okay, it's not connected at all. I will say one thing I'm already noticing is the further back you go, the more you're going to have to exaggerate the depth in order to get the effect you want. I'm also noticing as I move these around, obviously these are all on the same Y level. We have this downward arc going on. So now the gaps are 1, 3, 5, 7, and it's all at the same Y level. And we get something like this. The Y level skew is going to be really interesting to work with. Let's see. Yeah, so now you can really see that kind of Y level distortion that you get because of the depth. This is useful to know. It's also a bit annoying. That means if I want to make a specific shape, it might be a bit more plug and play with finding the location of where certain blocks should be. Now, here's my next goal. I want to create this same line over here, but I want to make it fully connected. So right now, there's these gaps. I want it to look like kind of a telescope, you know, a line of blocks slowly shrinking. And there we go. Very easy to do, actually, especially referencing back and forth with the perspective. It was basically just making small adjustments. It's a very intuitive technique, I won't lie. What's crazy is that this shape, this line, it takes this much depth to pull that off. This is like, how many blocks is this? Hold on. This is over 100 blocks in depth. I think this is enough for me to attempt my first little challenge here. I'm going to try to make a perfect circle or something like it. A more refined circle than would usually be possible. Maybe a heart. That's a fun shape. And for reference, I'll build a heart right here. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to attempt to make it a lot smoother using the depth tricks we learned over there. That is a little rough, but it gets the idea across. That is obviously far more detailed than this. And, well, the second you move away from that angle, it breaks. You know, you always see these illusions in museums or whatever or online. It's kind of cool to make one of your own. And as long as you have FreeCam mod and you're able to bounce back and forth like this, it's not a difficult process at all. I'm just bouncing back and forth, placing a block somewhere, seeing if it works out. If it doesn't, I can just remove it and build it somewhere else. I'm starting to gain an intuition slowly of kind of where I'm at in space and how what I do at that location in space is going to affect the results up here. Now, when it comes to the actual builds that we're going to be attempting today, I've got two in mind. One of them's a landscape and the other is an organic. The original reference I have is a landscape. It's a floating island kind of thing. I want to do something similar, but I want to use a different kind of biome or theme. I'm thinking desert? Alright, well, I'm really happy with this. For a first attempt, I think I did a pretty good job. There's a lot to note when it comes to this build. One thing that you realize halfway through doing something like this is that technically I could have built this whole thing all the way back here, right? This is, whatever this kind of pixel art is, the finest resolution that I'm getting is whatever is all the way back there. So, could I technically build this whole thing all the way on the back wall? Yes. Is it as cool? No. The fact that this breaks the second I move is just really neat. And the fact that this minecart is made up of like 3 different, 4 different, 5 different layers, and none of it works until I'm right in this position, it's so cool. Plus, if you think about it, it's a lot more efficient to do things this way. It uses up a lot less resources. You know, these blocks are a lot less blocks than if it was all the way back there making the same shape. On top of that, you can still do things that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. For example, the thickness of this relative to this, if this was all on one plane, I wouldn't be able to pull this off, especially like the scaffolding down here and the rope here. There's a bunch of very subtle things here that only work because of the perspective. Another thing I find really cool is that if you back up from this, you can see the cone, the vision cone, the perspective cone, the lines that are created. There's some very clear angles here that are because of the perspective skew. I don't know the science behind this or the math behind it. Maybe I should learn it someday, but it looks cool. Seeing an entire project like this laid out gets you a much better understanding of what's actually going on here. In fact, I think my intuition when it comes to using perspective this way, just for a more pixel arty style, is really good now. The way I like to think about it is that we are just making pixel art, except we have a third axis, which is not whatever this is, you know, or Z or whatever. It's scale. So all we're doing is taking a block. If we want to make it smaller, we're moving it backwards. And then because of perspective and the fact that it skews along these kind of lines here, vertically and horizontally, you have to adjust for that, right? You have to account for that. So it is three-dimensional, but instead of thinking of it as X, Y, Z, it's almost better to think of it as X, Y, and then scale, right? Now, moving on from this, I think I want to make another build that is using the same kind of technique, but I want to introduce color, which is going to get really confusing. You see here, we're all using the same color, this black, for the silhouette. It's not too complicated. Overlapping blocks aren't a problem. You see that's in front of that. It's all the same color, so it just blends. But imagine if one of those is a highlight, like a white color or whatever. All of a sudden, I have to do a lot more planning when it comes to what depth I'm working at, what blocks are scaled to a certain value. And on top of that, the actual image, the composition I make, is going to be a lot more complex. I have something in mind. I don't know if I'll be able to pull it off. I definitely can't draw it. I tried to. You know, quick side note tangent here. I'm not the greatest drawer. I actually drew this original reference, and the final product in the game ended up being 10 times better than whatever I drew on paper. Kind of an interesting, funny thing there of the medium I'm using. Even though this is a brand new technique, I'm still much better at it because it's in Minecraft. But anyway, I'm going to attempt to build the thing I have in mind. Wish me luck. So, I ended up starting with some reference planes, moving them around and finding a good spot for them. I broke the Doctor into three main components of the body, the mask, and the head, and it was important to place these properly before I got too far ahead. From there came coloring and detailing, which I had to take one section at a time. I got the easy stuff out of the way, like the lenses and mask, but then I had to do the fabric, which, for someone who has no traditional art experience, is a massive headache. I ended up just fading out the lower half so that I didn't have to do any more of that, and it actually turned out pretty good. The end product is something that I would not expect myself to make in a very long time, so really, no matter how it looks, I'm happy with it, because this is without a doubt one of the coolest things I've ever done. So much to break down when it comes to individual things. There is so much detail put into this. It hurts my brain. I could have shaded the bubbles a bit, but I think they look fine, simple like that. It keeps them a part of the background, despite, you know, them working into the foreground a bit. It did help a lot for most of this to be in black and white, besides the purple and the green. The one part that is colored on the Plague Doctor itself is the inner part of this hat here. 1.21.8 does introduce fog, and that fog is noticeable when it comes to this. I don't want to point it out because then it might ruin it for you, but there is definitely a bit of separation here because of it. And the inner part here is a lot lighter because of it as well. So when this was all black, it looked kind of weird, so I went with this colored bit. That way there's at least a little bit of a reason why it's faded like that. And it actually made a night and day difference. This looks so much better this way. A lot of the cool things I did with perspective involved like the underside of the beak here being a whole separate section. There's layering that just makes sense, like the glasses part or the lens part. The front eye is here, and then you got the bridge closer to the mask, and then the back eye is actually laying behind the mask. The hat, the band itself is a different layer, but I do have these two walls of diorite to kind of tie it into the rest of it. You can see these two diorite walls up here that tie it into the rest of the hat. It looks super nice. One of the things I'm most proud of is the shading inside the hood here. This is actually the highlight on the edge of the hood, but these bits here that make it look like the mask is kind of tucked away into the hood. The lens glare uses some perspective tricks as well. The stairs are actually at different scales right? So this first line looks larger than the second line, and then buttons all the way back on the lens for the tiniest parts. Oh, and last thing, when I was doing the fabric, the perspective layering actually was a big help, because the way I thought about it was basically blocks of light into dark. You know, little gradient chunks is the best way I can describe it. So like the upper part of the hood as an example, this is the closest part to the mask itself, and then it fades into darkness here, right? So we have this light edge that fades down into black, and then we have this instant jump back up to light. And usually when you're doing that by hand on a 2D plane, it gets kind of difficult to make those lines without them looking like lines. But here I didn't struggle with it at all, because it's just a layer on top of another layer. Like, look at that, which is exactly what fabric folding is, but it just makes a lot more sense for me to do this way. Of course, the bottom, the fabric got a little more complex than just a accordion kind of fold, so things got a little messy, but I think it works out. When we remove the frame and walk from the side, it's really cool to see everything line up into one position. That being said, I do like my frame though. I'm gonna keep it. And if you've watched up to this point, I hope I can keep you. Okay, that sounds really weird. I mean, as a viewer, if you like the video, then make sure to like and subscribe and do the things. There's a lot more to experiment with when it comes to this perspective stuff. I considered doing a building. I gave up on it. If you want to see me attempt that again, then maybe we make another video. Let me know your ideas down in the comments. For now, I go. Bye. Bye. Bye.